War doesn't always make heroes. Sometimes it reveals them. Before he ever set foot on a battlefield, John Kenneally was already fighting a different kind of war, not against an enemy nation, but against the life he was born into. He grew up in Birmingham, 1912, a restless young man named Leslie Jackson, son of an Irish mother and an English father who never quite saw eye to eye. Even as a boy, Jackson had a streak that couldn't be tamed, clever, sharp-tongued, and allergic to authority. He wanted more than what the gray streets of Birmingham had to offer. When the Second World War began, he saw his chance to fight, to belong, to matter. But the army had its rules, and Leslie Jackson had already broken too many of them. He joined the Royal Artillery, then deserted. He was caught, punished, sent back, and ran again. By 1941, he was wanted by the military police. His name was blacklisted, his record stained. For most men, that would have been the end of the story. But not for him, because one day, outside a barracks in London, he overheard a group of Irish guards talking, proud, confident, ready for battle. Something about their swagger, their spirit called to him. So Leslie Jackson did something extraordinary. He became one of them. He took the identity of another man, a soldier named John Patrick Kenneally, an Irish guardsman about to return home. He assumed his name, his papers, and enlisted under it. From that moment, Leslie Jackson was gone, and John Kenneally, the man history would remember, was born. By 1942, John Kenneally was officially a guardsman in the British Army, a new name, a new life, and a secret that could have ended it all. He knew that if anyone discovered who he really was, Leslie Jackson, deserter, he'd face a firing squad. But for once in his life, the man who'd always run from rules was ready to live by them. The Irish Guards were everything he'd never had: brotherhood, discipline, purpose. They were a regiment built on tradition and loyalty, forged from Irish pride and British steel. And Kenneally, or Jackson, threw himself into it with a fury that shocked everyone. He trained harder than anyone. He took punishment without complaint. And though his accent and his past sometimes slipped through, his courage never did. He wasn't just trying to prove himself to the army. He was trying to prove he deserved the name he'd stolen. By early 1943, Kenneally's unit, part of the 1st Battalion, Irish Guards, was deployed to Tunisia, North Africa. There, under a sun that baked the desert to glass, the British and German forces clashed in brutal tank battles across endless dunes. The enemy was Rommel's Afrika Korps, the Desert Fox himself. Veteran soldiers, ruthless, efficient, seemingly unstoppable. And somewhere among the chaos of smoke and sand, a man with a stolen name was about to etch that name into history. Tunisia was a graveyard for the unprepared. The air shimmered with heat. The horizon was always on fire. And for the Irish Guards, stationed near the town of Jebel Bouaoukaz, May 1943 became a month of pure hell. German tanks dominated the battlefield. Machine gun fire tore through the ridges. Every advance was paid for in blood. Kenneally was serving as a lance corporal, commanding a small section of men pinned down under enemy fire. Their position was being shredded by German MG-42s, the buzzsaws of the desert. Every few seconds, another burst sent sand and blood flying into the air. Most men would have waited for orders, or cover, or a miracle. Kenneally didn't wait for anything. He grabbed his Bren gun, loaded a fresh magazine, and sprinted straight toward the machine gun nests alone. Bullets snapped past his ears. The air was so thick with sand, he could barely see. But he kept running. He hit the first German position like a storm, cutting down the crew before they could swing their gun around. Then he moved to the next, and the next, each time, firing until his barrel smoked, then snatching another weapon from the fallen and moving on. When his comrades finally caught up, they found a trail of destruction, and one man, covered in sweat and blood, still firing. That day, his bravery didn't just save his platoon. It broke the German advance wide open. The following morning, he did it again. 2 days in a row, John Kenneally charged enemy positions head-on, driving back the Germans almost single-handedly. His commander couldn't believe it. Even hardened veterans spoke of him in awe. In a war full of orders, strategy, and fear, Kenneally had acted purely on instinct, a deserter turned soldier who'd become the embodiment of courage. When the smoke cleared and the desert fell silent, word spread through the ranks like wildfire. One Irish guard had done the impossible. John Kenneally, the quiet one, the man with no history, had taken on an entire German company alone and lived. His officers filed the report. His men backed every word. And before long, his name was whispered through every regiment in North Africa. But Kenneally didn't boast. He didn't smile for the cameras or pose with his weapon. He just cleaned his gun, wiped the dust from his face, and waited for the next fight. Because part of him still couldn't believe it was real. Not the battle, but the name they were using to praise him. He wasn't John Kenneally, Irish guardsman, hero of the empire. He was Leslie Jackson, the runaway from Birmingham, the factory worker's son who'd lied his way into greatness. And if the army ever found out, that greatness would end in a cell. Then came the letter. It was from the king. On June 26, 1943, in a small ceremony under the Tunisian sun, John Kenneally stood to attention as his commanding officer read aloud the citation for the Victoria Cross, the highest award for bravery in the British Empire. The words were simple, but the meaning was eternal. For conspicuous gallantry and devotion to duty. For twice, in the face of heavy enemy fire, he charged alone, breaking through enemy lines and turning the tide of battle. His conduct throughout was an example of the highest courage. The medal was pinned to his chest. The men around him cheered. But inside, Kenneally was trembling, not from pride but from fear, because he knew the name engraved on that medal wasn't really his. He was a national hero built on a stolen identity. When the war finally ended and the soldiers came home, most wanted peace. But peace wasn't easy for a man with 2 names and 1 truth. For a while, Kenneally tried to live quietly, working odd jobs, keeping his head down. He had no interest in parades or politics. He'd done his duty, and for once survived it. But secrets have a way of catching up. In the early 1950s, someone recognized him, not as a war hero, but as Leslie Jackson, the deserter who'd vanished from the Royal Warwickshire Regiment before Dunkirk. The truth spilled out. The army was stunned. The press was merciless. Headlines called him the imposter hero. Parliament debated whether he should be stripped of his Victoria Cross. But the men who had fought beside him, the ones who had seen him charge through machine gun fire, refused to let it happen. They stood by him, every single one, because whatever is past, John Kenneally or Leslie Jackson had done something most men never would. He had faced death, not for glory, but for redemption. In the end, the government made its choice. He would keep the medal, because heroism, they said, could not be erased by the mistakes that came before it. John Kenneally lived quietly after that, far from the headlines, far from the war. He never sought fame, and he never sold his story. When asked why he'd done what he did, he gave the same answer every time. Because I was there, and someone had to do it. He died in 2000, aged 80, buried with full military honors, the Victoria Cross resting on his coffin. A medal for a man who had once run from the army, and ended up defining what courage meant. John Kenneally's story is one of the strangest in all of World War II. A deserter who became a hero. A liar who became a legend. A man who stole a name, only to make it immortal. He reminds us that courage isn't about being perfect. It's about what you do when the world gives you no reason to believe in yourself. Some men fight for orders. Some fight for honor. John Kenneally fought to prove he wasn't the man his past said he was. And in the sands of Tunisia, under the burning sun of a dying empire. He proved it, not with words, but with fire.